Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We focus on mostly the obscure and esoteric, and we also focus on the theories of everything, all-encompassing theories that you can apply to your whole life, and they can improve your quality of life and help you connect a lot of dots, put the pieces together. Today is our 266th video on Dewey B. Larson and his reciprocal system of theory. And the reciprocal system of theory was first conceived of by Mr. Larson back in about 1930. And he spent a few decades working out the kinks, trying to put it into a package through a process of induction, and finally put out his two fundamental postulates in the late 1950s. Then once he put out his postulates, he began a process of deduction. If this, then that. And I did about 15 videos early on, about 6 months ago, maybe a little more, on his talk that is called The Deductive Development of the Reciprocal System. And so that's where he starts out with his postulates, and if this, then that, well, if this, then that, and then if that, then this. And it's about 165 steps that he goes through, so you can see his thinking, you can see where the theory is going, and you can see, how to use it yourself, because that's the great thing about the reciprocal system, is that if you understand how the system works, you have unleashed it, and you can use it yourself. And Larson himself did say, the theory itself is correct. Whether I have applied the theory correctly in all situations is a different question. I may have made some mistakes in that, and indeed, I think he did make a few mistakes, and some of them have been worked out by the author we're going to be focusing on today, Dr. Bruce Perrett. He did some revising of some of Larson's work and ended up coming up with what he calls RS2, Reciprocal System 2, the reevaluation of the reciprocal system. But before we get to the reevaluation, we probably should figure out what the system is itself. And basically, to kind of paraphrase the first postulate, the first and by far most important postulate is that we don't live in a universe of matter. And we don't even live in a universe of energy. We live in a universe of motion. And so there have been some people throughout history who have made that claim themselves, including such luminaries as René Descartes and Thomas Hobbes, Arthur Eddington, have all proposed a universe of motion. But what separates Larson is his definition of motion as the relationship between space and time. Seems a little abstract, but put it more concretely, you think about speed. What is speed? Speed is a kind of motion. It's about the most basic kind of motion that we can think of. And speed is a relationship between space and time. The car was moving 20 miles per hour. 20 miles of space in 1 hour of time. Space over time. Speed is space over time. How about another one? Well, we try acceleration. I dropped the ball out the window and it fell at 9.8 meters per second squared. 9.8 meters of space and seconds to the second power. Space over time to the second power is acceleration, another form of motion. But for Larson, Everything, all the scientific quantities are forms of motion, including matter and energy. For Larson, energy is simply time over space. It took me 3 hours to move that thing 20 feet. 3 hours of time in 20 feet of space. And matter for Larson was time to the third power over space to the third power. This all gets into the first kind of caveat of Larson's first postulate, is that space and time have the identical qualities. They are really the same thing. They're two reciprocal aspects of the same thing. One is the numerator and the other is the denominator. But they both have what Larson calls their coordinate aspects. So both space and time come in multiple dimensions. I would say 3 or 4 dimensions, depending on whether you're using cubic coordinates or tetrahedral coordinates, X, Y, Z coordinates, or if you use like Buckminster-Fuller's system, you can just envision a cube, and if you put an X on each one of the faces of the cube, then you also have a star tetrahedron in that exact same space. So that's kind of why I'm saying 3 or 4, but that's just probably complicating the matter too much. Both space and time have at least three dimensions. We're accustomed to that idea with space. We're accustomed to 3 dimensions of space, but we have to adjust ourselves to think about time that way, 3 dimensions of time. In fact, that mere suggestion got me kicked out of a physicist's office when I went to her office hours to try to talk to her a little bit, introduce her to the reciprocal system. When I mentioned that he had multiple dimensional time, she pretty much showed me the door. Along with saying, "I've never heard of him before." So that's where the academics are. If you've never heard of him before, that means that it's wrong. And if it's introducing any concepts that you're not familiar with, that also means that it's wrong. So that's where academia is. She also told me that I should be happy that I'm only dealing with her, because if I had actually gone to the chair of the department, he would have ripped me a new one, so whatever on that. But, that just shows you what kind of charlatans, exist in the academic world. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but I'm saying a lot of them are, because that's where I came from. I'm not a physicist, but I'm from academia, and I've seen incredible amounts of real closed-mindedness and just arrogance of we know this and you don't, and let's keep it that way. Anyway, so there is a coordinate aspect to space and time. Also, in the second caveat for Larson is that there is what he calls a clock aspect to space and time, and that's a scalar motion. Scalar motion is a motion that has a magnitude, but it has no direction or no particular direction. This you can think of as like the flow of time. Time is always getting later and later and later, but it's not moving in any particular direction. It's just getting later. It's not getting later, west or north or south, but it's just getting later. You can also envision this using a balloon with a bunch of dots on it. If you blew up the balloon, all of the dots would be moving away from each other. If you suck in the balloon, all the dots are moving toward each other. That is respectively an outward and inward scalar motion. So scalar motion has a direction really either out or in, but not a vectorial direction. And that whole situation was actually observed by the Hubble telescope even before Larson came up with this stuff. They observed that all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. That is the progression of space. That's what Larson calls clock space. Time is always getting later and later and later. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. And then the third caveat is what Larson calls the discrete unit postulate. That basically means that space and time are quantized, meaning that they only come in discrete units. There is no continuity. There is a minimum unit of space and a minimum unit of time. If you don't have a full unit of space, then you don't have space. And if you don't have a full unit of time, then you don't have time. And by the reciprocal postulate, where the universe is made out of motion, and motion is the relationship between space and time, if you don't have a full unit of space and you don't have space, that means that all you have is time. And if you don't have a full unit of time, so you don't have time, that means that all you have is space. So Larson calls these regions the time region and the space region. The time region is everything that's within 1 unit of space, and the space region is everything that is within 1 unit of time. And those both occur in different sectors, sectors of the universe. So the other part of this is that space, if you have exactly 1 unit of time and you have exactly 1 unit of space, so you have exactly 1 unit of space in exactly 1 unit of time, space over time, speed. If you have exactly 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time, you have the speed of light. The speed of light is what Larson calls unit speed. That is 1 unit of speed. And in the reciprocal system, 1 is the center. So the speed of light is the center of the universe, or it's the midpoint of the universe. You would think of that in legacy science, 0 is the midpoint. Okay, you have 0 in the middle, and then you have +1, +2, +3, and so on. On the positive end and on the negative end, you have -1, -2, and -3. But in the reciprocal system, you use a multiplicative system with 1 at the center, and then on the positive side, you have 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the negative side, you have 1/2, 1/3, 1/4, and 1/5. Meaning that the negative infinity is actually 0, 1 over infinity. And when you have a system like this, so then if you have the speed of light as the unit speed, as the 1, then you have an entire half of the universe that is moving faster than the speed of light. Larson refers to that as the cosmic sector. And then within that cosmic sector is the space region. And then the half of the universe, the half that the physicists already know about, is what Larson calls the material sector. That's the sector that's moving slower than the speed of light. And within that region is what Larson calls the time region. And the time region is the realm within 1 unit of space. So this is basically the realm of the microscopic, the realm of the atoms and particles and molecules. And the same in the cosmic sector, except that would be what legacy science calls the antimatter, but Larson calls it cosmic matter. Okay, so that's a quick overview, maybe not so quick, overview of the reciprocal system. Now, if we look at Dr. Bruce Perret, he's reevaluating the system in certain ways. One of the ways is from the second postulate, which is stated briefly as the universe conforms to the relations of ordinary commutative mathematics, its magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. Euclidean geometry is basically, your XYZ coordinates. Perret says that is not inclusive enough, and that the geometry of the universe is actually projective geometry, of which Euclidean geometry is just a subset of projective geometry. Perret has made some corrections, some revisions of Larson on other matters as well, including the photon, along with Dr. KVK Nehru. Perret has gone to propose that the photon is a birotational system as opposed to in Larson's system where it is a simple harmonic motion, a combination of a translational motion and a vibrational motion that is perpendicular to it. But in Perret and Nehru's system, it's two counter rotations that creates the wave-like form of a photon. Also, Perret has revised Larson in terms of things like symbolism and also the scale of the universe. How big is the universe and how far back does it go in time? So the scale of time and space. Now, we're looking at Perret's article here that is called Extra-Dimensional and Extraterrestrial Entities. And Perret's writing tends to be kind of speculative, especially when he's writing under the pen name of Daniel Phoenix III. And this is one of his Daniel Phoenix III, the Daniel Papers. And Daniel was supposed to have been a young computer programmer working on the Montauk project from the early 1980s, a government secret time travel operation that went very, very bad at a certain point and caused a lot of people to lose their minds and some others to lose their lives. But I don't know whether Perret actually experienced that or if it's just, just a fictional persona. But we're going to start this section here that is called extra-dimensional entities. Now we have the basics to understand extra-dimensional entities, the majority of which are entities with a presence in 3D time. Okay, now today is the fourth day that I've been reading this article. So if you want to go back and get the whole article, you go back and watch the first three videos from the 3 days prior to this one. This includes entities that are native born in the cosmic sector, that have learned to access space, and entities in the material sector to have obtained conscious access to the realm of 3D time. Consider a cosmic creature, a native-born temporal entity that has their physical structure in time, and therefore can only interact with 3D space as force. They are invisible to our normal waking consciousness, yet since time changes space, we can still bump into things that aren't there, and they can make things fly around the room without any observable cause. Ghosts, poltergeists, and the like are all entities of this nature, entities with a structure in 3D time. And yes, we appear as ghosts to the cosmic life in 3D time as we cross the barrier in the other direction. Two other situations arise for extra-dimensional life, where an entity begins to consciously interact with the spirit complex going beyond space and time. When material sector life develops sufficient intelligence. That intelligence provides the modus operandi for free will to follow the silver cord across into the dimensions of equivalent space, the temporal dimensions. Use your mind to open the door to time. When someone here in the material sector begins to access the temporal dimensions, we call it ascension. When a cosmic entity living in three-dimensional time performs a similar growth of consciousness, then they are actually accessing their equivalent time, dimensions giving them access to the 3D spatial dimensions. These cosmic entities that are crossing over from the three-dimensional time to three-dimensional space are the ones we refer to as ascended masters, angelic beings, or advanced spirits. Okay, let me just go back here. He's got a bunch of footnotes. I'm just making sure that there's nothing crucial in his footnotes. Some of his footnotes are just kind of asides, and some of his footnotes are actually for humor, but some of them are useful for the presentation here. Okay, this silver thread is known in the Sanskrit as Sutratma, and the life thread of the Antakarana that connects the physical body to the soul. Okay, now he's got a chart here of the densities and, you know, what's going on. So, you know, the densities go from 1 to 7, and then they all are using 3 spatial dimensions. But in terms of the time dimensions used, you just have 0 time dimensions for the first 3 densities. And then starting with the 5th, he doesn't really have the 4th density on here, and I'm not sure why, but they are using the 5th, 6th, and 7th densities are using 1, 2, and 3 time dimensions, which is the equivalent of 2, 3, and 4 equivalent space dimensions. So, you know, and so in terms of the ontology, first density is, he says, rocks. Second density, plants and animals. Third density, people. And then 5th, 6th, and 7th density are ascended spiritual man. And then after that, he says, okay, who stole 4th density? Why was it left out of the table? It was left out to make a point. Remember Professor Albert Einstein and the challenge of expressing a rotational dimension in a linear system? There is no one-dimensional form of equivalent space. So you cannot get a 4D structure directly from the dimensions of space and equivalent space. However, that does not preclude the existence of 4th density nor a 4D structure to life, courtesy of a little gem discovered by Leonhard Euler back in the 18th century, which is known these days as Euler's formula. And Euler was one of the great mathematicians, and his name looks like it would be pronounced Euler, but it's, I believe, pronounced Euler. And his formula is, in this particular case, this formula is e to the ix equals cosine x plus I sine x. And if you remember, he talked a little bit about the imaginary number earlier. So this is bringing in that imaginary number I. And I was mentioning that I really just means a 90-degree rotation. So we will, I guess, resume right at this spot when we take over tomorrow. And we got just a couple more paragraphs to go in this section. We'll be talking about this fourth density. He talks about really like half a dimension here, and that it's one equivalent space dimension. So that's the 4D part. And the ontology is the vibrations of love and light for fourth density. And we'll go into that starting tomorrow. All right. Thank you for tuning in, and have a beautiful day.